All right, let's start today. Today's lesson, I'm going to be talking about how to work from a photo again. And I really like the way you used really low contrast. So the contrast is nice and even everywhere else. It is a little bit light in your version, but um, some of the issues that you have here is that listen, all right, this little cast shadow, this is your life. This is your goals. This is your more important than your children to you. This, oh my God, look at that. Look at that beauty. Look at those cast shadows. Damn, mommy. Look at that. These are your life, all right? These are why you are an artist. This is the deliciousness that is art. Right here is capturing that beautiful, beautiful remnant of the geometric anatomy, the native geometry of the light. Okay? This is what it's all about. And right here, almost there, not really. It's kind of like secondary. So you've made the most important part of the portrait secondary, and the least important part, the most important part, which is the lashes. You've made the lashes way too important. You've made the eyes, and you give the eyes this. Remember how I told you guys that when I was a kid, I used to always make the eyes like blue because I have brown eyes. So I was just like obsessed with like the silvery blue Final Fantasy eye. Everyone just has colored eyes, one purple fucking rainbow eye. I don't know. And if your reference has a black eye or a darker eye, even if it's a colored eye and it looks darker in the photograph, go for it. It'll help you work as a gauge for your dark spots. But that aside, the lashes, the eyebrows, the detail in the eyebrows, none of that stuff is important. Absolutely none of it. So let's go into Liquify real quick and just capture some very basic topical likeness. So I'm just trying to capture the gesture of her eyebrow. Her eyebrow is very, very close to her eye. It's giving her that intense gaze. When you have a beautiful face like this, and it's not just your typical Barbie doll face, it has some real organic beauty to it. You want to capture it exactly as it is on the photograph. This is really good for your future, like your development outside of references. For you to be able to memorize a face that isn't exactly a Barbie outside of your references and be able to paint this just with your imagination, it's really, really good. It shows your caliber as an artist, as an independent thinker. You're capable of bringing in these these really mature choices and features and sizes of features and scale without being forced to by your reference. So you've made her nose actually much smaller than it is. You need to just go for it. Go for the full glory, the full size of what it is in your reference. This will save your life later on. It will save your portrait. It will save your portfolio. You won't have a boring old industry portfolio. You'll have some really mature portraits in there. And when I say mature, I mean we're not painting the typical Barbie doll anymore. The upper lip is not as plump as you made it, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And yeah, you can say I brought in my own thing, but you didn't. You didn't bring in your own thing. You brought in the universal thing. Your own thing isn't the perfect Barbie doll face. That's not what you call your own thing. You brought in what you've memorized. You've brought in what you like to see in pictures and in anime and in cartoons or animation. So no, that wasn't your own thing. It was what you thought should be the typical standard of beauty. Beauty doesn't belong to you. The universal golden ratio doesn't belong to you. It's not your own thing. It's the universal, it's everyone's. It's everyone's opinion of what is pretty. It's the face you constantly see in magazines. Your own thing would have to be enlarging the nose even more than it is in the photograph. That's what we mean when we say we're bringing our own thing. Sorry about my coughing. I'm just getting over a cold. Alright, so the eyebrow is a straight line up, where yours kind of just leaks out just a little bit. Tucking that in. The inner line of her inner corner of the eye is kind of perfectly aligned with the nostril, so I'm going to connect that there. And then just balance out the eyes. The very, very beautiful face. It deserves the credit of being copied exactly as it is in the photograph. She doesn't have these massive cheekbones. Again, that typical beauty Barbie doll. If you guys aren't noticing that you are pulling these proportions in your work, take a moment to assess what you think is beautiful, what you respond to. The majority of artists, even professional artists that are very developed in the industry, have this really, really sickly perfection in the faces that they draw. And it's really unfortunate because there's so much more variety and so much more maturity to be found when you paint outside of this golden ratio. And that's the main key reason to ever go back to references, is to fix this error that you might have in your work. Be able to appreciate the natural, organic proportions that this face comes with. It's not an ugliness. Everything is ugly compared to the golden ratio. But it's more human than the golden ratio. And you want some human in your work. You don't want everything to be a perfect elf creature and just lose credibility like that as a designer. She has a pretty high hairline. Alright, so I basically start with likeness and the feature that I want to accentuate the most. This nose, I'm going to add in more contrast so it feels like it's much closer to the camera than the rest of the face. I'm going to decide, creative choice, as the artist, decide to bring in more contrast on the nose than the eyes. And I've made this choice early on. Alright. So trust me when I tell you, you will get sick of the golden ratio. You will get sick of all that, those perfect, beautiful face. You will get sick of it fast, if you haven't already. Before, after. So you're trying to force in this perfect, plump lip. And she's got very, very full lips. It's that style that's forcing in this your rendition of it. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to make it something move back into the golden ratio. But the golden ratio is more of a crutch than it is a stylistic choice or a maturity in your portfolio. I'm so sorry. I am just completely losing my voice. 1 second. Okay. So I'm sure you guys have seen these. They're really trending now, to take a photo and draw like the anime cartoony version of that picture. I swear to God, I just laugh when I see those. I'm like, there's zero skill behind this. All you're doing is just getting the same old template anime face and you're making them wear the same thing in the photo reference. There's literally nothing you're doing at this point that is indicative of some sort of like superior ability to see features that no one else is seeing. You're literally ignoring all the most important features this person has in their photograph. And you're making a anime version of them. And I guess if you're going to say, yeah, I'm making an anime version of them, then you're just literally using the same face over and over again, just changing the costume. Do you want to be that kind of an artist? I know if I was your age, or if I was earlier on in my journey, and someone asked me that, I'd say absolutely not. I want to be, the best of the best. It's kind of like an Ash Ketchum naivety to me. I say, no, absolutely not. I don't want to depend on one kind of face. I want to draw all the faces. That's who I want you guys to be. Don't just depend on one typical beautiful face and see the world through that lens. It's a very, very small lens. Alright, so what were the things that I said were the most important things about this photograph here? I'm going to go over and try to find them exactly as they are in the photograph. I'm going to get darken layer, grab one of my darker values, and I'm going to start forming these cast shadows. I'm going to zoom all the way out. Zooming out is really important. And as you can see, half her nose is in shadow. Half her nose, or not half her nose, but half in the measurement underneath the pyramid. But just the lower portion here where the shadow starts, that's what we need to find here. So I don't think I should use darken layer just yet. So sorry about my cough. It's not going away. It's just like there. It's my companion today. Okay. So you made this shadow stretch all the way to the end. This is wrong. Only half the nose needs that. I'll take care of that in a sec. And what I'm doing here is I'm just forming this exact cast shadow. This exact cast shadow is like the direct child, the direct descendant of the light source. It is the savior of your image. It is the second coming. It is the I don't want to say God, but don't offend anybody. But this is what it's all about. And one thing you really have to remember is that if the skin has been the same tone all around, it's a local texture, the shadow will have the same level to it everywhere you go. So this shadow value and this shadow value should, on average, typically be the same value. Alright, so I'm trying to make them have the same temperature. I will make them sharp as need be. But, hey Marco. Marco. So I'm making these shadows more edgy. I'm still zoomed out. My brush is small, but I'm zoomed out. It's only because I have to address the sharpness of this shadow. This nostril is light all the way around. Now I'm blocking in. I'm trying to find these exact borders, these geometries. And when I say geometry, I mean the geometric anatomy. Can anyone define what geometric anatomy is before I give you the clue? Can anyone define what it means? You're trying to force the visibility of the other nostril. It's not visible. Let go. Let go of the other side of the car. You don't have to show the other wheel if the car is in 3/4 view. Alright? Can anyone define what geometric anatomy means? Okay, so I'm not so worried about the dark spots. I'm not so worried about where the nose starts and where the cast shadow starts. I'm just trying to capture the right amount of contrast and edge work and blocking in the geometry. Right now at this point, the cast shadow and the nose are working as one unit. They're sharing values. So I have to be very, very careful. Alright, what I'm doing next is, now that I've captured the core shadow is always dressed up and accessorized by secondary light source diffusion, so the terminator becomes visible. So right here, right along here, there's all the secondary light source, and I'm introducing that. I'm going to zoom in a little bit because it's detail. I'm introducing that with a nice heavy brush. I'm making some really important choices. The most important choices of your painting are made with a blocking brush. You don't make them with a flimsy soft edge. That's later on when you kind of unify the texture together. Right here, this top corner of the cast shadow gets a little bit darker. So I'm just going to start introducing that value. The face made of planes, the low poly version of a face. Excellent, Al. Geometric planes and foreshortening are helpful if you have a good understanding of geometric anatomy. That's not necessarily what it is. Geometric planes, geometric shapes that make up the face. Excellent. So it ranges from pyramids to spheres to cubes to prisms. Alright, so everything is about this cast shadow right now, and it's something that covers a lot of the face. It is a beautiful little indication of the direction and the intensity and the magnitude of the light. So all of these, all of my attention goes to this little cast shadow. Cast shadows do blur the further they get from the object casting them, so I'm going to using my smudge tool. And again, it's really important for you to get yourself a good scatter brush to use on your smudge tool on Photoshop. It is the best way, really very, very close to the way we do things traditionally, by smudging. And it helps you appreciate the texture a little bit better. And instead of constantly bringing in or faking your blending ability by the side effect of a good brush that you have, so that's kind of faking the blendability. Instead we're smudging, we're separating the brush from the blending. We're applying the paint and then reorganizing the paint. That's another way to paint. There's another technique. So I'm throwing down, you see this is light, right? But we know there's a cast shadow here. So paint the cast shadow first in its exact shape, reflecting the object casting it, and then diffuse. Most important thing at this point right now is just getting that perfect cast shadow. It is your muse. It is the reason why you got into painting. Make it the reason why you got into painting. It is everything. I'm not that, it's really cocky to say, I got into painting because I really like my original characters and I want to bring them to life. Yeah, we all did that. But we mature, so our tastes mature and our convictions mature. Right now, it's all about the cast shadow and the form. That should be the only thing you're concerned with when you're working from a reference. You're trying to bring all this information back for later. You're storing information for winter. Alright, so what I usually do with eyebrows is I just smudge the hell out of them. Right? We don't care about every single individual lash or every individual hair. They mean nothing for the light behavior. They do nothing for the light. So we're more concerned with the geometry right now. So let's just get these out of the way. She's got a beautiful gaze to her. I'm going to darken the eyes. So we want to capture that. We want to capture the gesture of the portrait, what's happening there. Right, so I'm just darkening the eyes. And then this upper half of the eyelid. Again, you're working from like this beauty standard, so you made the upper eyelid really light like she was wearing makeup. That is actually coming out of like a symbol or a beauty standard that you have in your mind currently that you need to replace. And then for the nose, the geometric anatomy of the nose is saying that her nose bridge is kind of pinched in this direction. So I'm going to bring in, actually I'm going to block it in. I'm going to block in where the bridge starts and where the side starts. Yes, this is too dark, but I'll lighten it up later. This is just for the sake of capturing the value. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to darken her skin tone. She's a little too light. So I'm just going to darken ever so slightly, just so that when I do bring in a big block of highlight, it actually affects the painting. So I'm going to give some light for the nose bridge. Where the nose bridge might start. And there's that, if you squint your eyes, you see this V shape. Do you see that V shape right here? So we want that. Right above her eyebrows. It's okay if it's messy. Trust me, the smudge brush will take care of all that later. Right now what you're doing is blocking in. When you separate in your study practice, you separate the blending aspect from the paint application aspect. You start to think less like a painter and more like an architect, more like someone who's constructing this face instead of painting it and accidentally starting to paint your symbols in. So think more like an architect. Think about the actual structural mechanics behind the nose, why it is what it is. So I'm just trying to find where all these blocks are, separating planes from each other. We have a nice laugh line plane right here. Really would love if it looked just like her, so I'm trying to push the likeness as much as possible. She's very pretty. And this would be an excellent reference for some kind of like a symbolic illustration, really. I'm seeing so many ideas just pop in my head right now. Because that gaze is off screen, and when the gaze is not looking at the audience, it just automatically becomes a narrative for some reason. It's beautiful. And then on the side here, this is where the side of the nose ends, the prism or the cube or whatever it is you use to represent the geometry, whatever you decide to use to represent the geometry of the nose, it ends right along there. So I'm going to get my brush back. I'm going to keep blocking in. Trying to see where this ends, and then as you can see, this whole section all the way down comes the fourth quarter that looks away from the canvas. From the forward view, from the rest of the face looking forward. And we're just blocking in. The top half of her head is fully illuminated. So one of the only areas that contests the brightness of the nose bridge is the actual forehead. Okay. Eyebrows contain a lot of the likeness of a face, so try in this stage to block in the general shape of her brow. She does have like a natural frown. And then now I'm just going to block in that secondary light source diffusion on the upper eyelid. I'm going to diffuse the side of her nose. It's very, very bright. Very dark and bright in the reference. Okay, and then this is really well done. The most sharp part of a cast shadow is the part that sits right on top of the light. One of the most sharp areas. because the light is right there, and if the light beam is so concentrated and centered in that area, the shadow will also be in reaction to that more sharp. So the shadow is a result of the intensity of the light source. So right now what I'm doing is I'm trying to reestablish how intense this light source is by sharpening any area that is directly adjacent or on a really, really bright spot. And this isn't everywhere. This isn't everywhere. This is only in the areas that look directly at the light source or are part of like this back and forth mirror reflection of the light source. Leaving the brightest value for the nose. See why we went dark? We went dark because the nose had more to build up, and we already had a light value. There was nothing left for the nose to build up and represent. She has a bit of an indentation on her nose. Seriously, if you guys can find references like these, they're more real to actual light and how light works in the real world than those idiotic, badly directed photographs off Google that usually are always some sort of fashion photography. They're trying to get rid of the cast shadow. Why are you trying to get rid of the only thing that's saving the portrait, the only thing that makes it look like it's in the real world? You never have perfect lighting in the real world when someone's standing in front of you in an elevator or sitting on a bench. You want to capture that kind of lighting. It's more organic, more believable, more real than something forced and edited and too soft and artificial feeling. Too much little reflectors used to diffuse shadows and just make the face visible only. It doesn't feel real. So she is very young, so she doesn't have that much of an indentation on either side of her cheeks, but she does have enough that we still have to start sharp and then diffuse. Just gonna darken any excess highlight. She has some secondary light source along the cheek here. You can see we haven't started any of the flowery blending and any of that excessive edge work, and we haven't started detailing. Nothing is more important than the light source, and saying that, the way to practice that, to believe in that and then prove you believe in that, is by focusing on the geometry. Nothing is more important than the geometry. So right here, we've got two major edges, right here and right here. And one of them is where the secondary light source stops. Please keep the discussion focused on the class topic. Make sure you're not discussing outside of class. If you have questions, of course, please ask them. I will have a Q&A session or a minute or two for questions at the end. Just make sure you write my name before you start asking questions, or else I won't find your question. I'm blurring away the hairline because the hairline doesn't just happen suddenly. It happens gradually. Many tiny little hairs work together at the edge of the face and then eventually become longer and longer hairs and eventually become hair chunks. So you want to introduce that first before painting in every single individual strand or hair. We never paint every single individual strand. So now there isn't enough contrast, so after I blend away some of these geometries, so when you do find the geometry, you don't just keep it there, you don't keep the planes there unless you're doing some sort of a sorrow head study. What you do is you blend away where you know you can blend, but not overblend where we have any severe geometries, especially as indicated by the photograph. Alright, so there's a lot of edge work that's being blended here along the eyebrows, just big pieces blended together. She has a much smaller mouth. I think that's why her face is cute, because she has a less wide mouth. There we go. So the other girl had a pretty wide mouth. She doesn't have that low jowl thingy. She has a very, very, it's not really a steep, but rounded, very soft top lip. got more pronounced curvature to her nostrils. Kind of a wider nose. And this eye looks all the way to the side. It's looking all the way to the side of the face. So I'm going to start bringing in some contrast. I'm going to start with the nose, but I will just quickly address the eyes, because they have this really, really stretched gaze. And I'll discuss the anything else to do with the eyes in a second. So for the nose, what we do is we're pretty much just trying to separate these planes from each other. Everything is nice and light now and balanced and ready for some contrast. So let me just save that. Come on, Photoshop. Be a little. What quality do you want the image? What does that mean, Poisonous Carnage? Love it if you guys just use your names. Alright. So I'm not sure what you mean by quality, but do ask me later on. Let me just finish this up first, and I'll answer all your questions. So what I'm doing right now is I'm laying down a big piece of darkness, and using my edge brush, I'm just going to erase away where I know the nostril ends. And this is one way of bringing in contrast. Many different ways. I mean, you are painting digitally, so you have access to that luxury. But if you're doing this in real life, of course, I would usually use a paper or something to stop me from going over too much into the nostrils. And then this cast shadow is really sharp, just a straight line down off the nostril. And it gets nice and dark at the top. And we have the same exact thing happen around the nostril as well. Oops. So again, we lay down our value radially, shrinking our brush as we go. In this format, this is perfect, alright? Try to keep the size of your photograph in the same canvas, almost the same size as your version. And then erasing away, trying to get that perfect edge. I have to redo this. And there is some more little anatomy in there, but pretty much her nose is downturned, so we don't see much of the nostril cavity itself, so you don't have to worry about that. But there is a little bit of the inner cartilage or the inner workings of the nostril visible at this point. And then for the secondary light source, I would just again do the same thing. New layer, throw in the secondary light source. The eraser is on an edge brush. I take no chances. My eraser has to be sharp. And I'm creating that edge again. Okay. And then in a new layer, just add in some quick indication of that inner anatomy there. Merge down, merge down, merge down. Keeping everything on one layer. Same thing with the rest of the nose. We're trying to find where the kind of ending point of the nose is, and that's why I'm saying this nostril and this cast shadow, this nose and this cast shadow work as one unit, because they're almost exact same value. You can't really see where the nostril ends. And that's why you have to paint them in together, so you don't forget that these are almost the same value. And then the other nostril, just a straight line. And then of course the ending point is a little lower than that. That's what these studies are for. That's what using a reference is for. It's not for finding another way to bring in that stupid, annoying, beautiful Barbie face. Barbie face is obsolete. It's nothing. It's garbage. It's garbage. You'll realize that as a designer, it's not going to be a measure of your caliber or your capacity to design by being able to draw that perfect Barbie doll face. It's how much organic power and anatomy and the real remnants of the anatomy that you bring in. That's what matters. So you can see all my edge work is all around the geometry and the cast shadows. And that I've kept the original proportions in the photograph. These will mean the world to me later on when I'm drawing from imagination and all I can do is just draw this annoying pretty face, and that's all that I could, bring together. It makes you feel weak. I felt so weak. And I realized all I could draw was just this pretty face. Yeah, whatever, I can draw a pretty face. A lot of students these days are making the mistake of thinking that that's really what it's all about. They look for these realistic anime faces and they just try to find anything just to keep that Barbie doll still in there. And though it is a skill that can be used industry-wise and in all kinds of portfolios for all kinds of reasons, it isn't necessarily the only thing that should be in your portfolio. Absolutely not. It should be less Barbie doll, more organic, more believable, more realistic faces. So I'm completely ignoring the lashes at this point. They're not part of the form, though they do represent how the form rotates around the eye. The lashes, or the lids rotate around the eye. At this point, they're just going to get in the way. I'm still trying to figure out where everything sits. So this whole section in the eyelid, under the eyebrow, I'm just going to darken it into one big chunk of shadow. Right? It has no business being light before I even establish where the upper eyelid is going to go and whatnot. Then I know that this whole area is diffused, so now I can go ahead. The core shadow has been established, and then the secondary light source comes in, not before I smudge. As you remember, the next stage after determining where geometry is just to blend. As you get as you get more skilled, you won't need to separate your blocking in from your blending. You can do it all at the same time. You won't need the smudge tool anymore because you'll have an eye for where everything happens and you'll be able to perform them both at the same time. But until then, please try to smudge as much as possible. And I don't know where this silly little idea came from that smudging is a sign of a bad artist. Who's the asshole going around saying these to people? Is it Satan? It's probably Satan. It's probably Satan saying you can't trace, don't use smudge tool. He just wants us all to suck. He's going around saying this shit. Man, I could kick his ass. Please smudge as much as you can. Get used to it, because when you transfer over into traditional, you will find it very hard to blend the same way as your soft brush. And if you teach yourself to reorganize the paint instead of just depending on the default blendability of your brush, these skills will not transfer. It's most surely Satan. It has to be. But Istebrak, didn't you say we ought to paint perfection because that's what the industry wants, etc.? No, I said you have to learn the basic beauty standard because that's what the industry wants. Exactly what I'm saying right now. The only place that face is used for is the industry. When you work with references for your own personal study, please do not make that face the only face that you draw. It's what I've always said. Do not make that perfect Barbie doll face the only thing that you draw. It's very bad. When I see illustrations that are painted independently, without a reference, we always go back to that default state, but we still try to capture some kind of largeness in the eyes, some kind of smallness in the eyes, some kind of wideness in the lips. We're not always moving everything back, and when I bring in the industry standard of beauty, it's usually for a really, really, and I'm sorry for using it, like a fucked up set of proportions, like some really bad, it doesn't even look human anymore. That's when I bring in the standard, because I don't have a reference, I'm just putting in the very, very default beauty standard. But when you have a reference, please, by all means, memorize exactly what the reference is telling you to do. Never depend on any one set of beauty standards at any point in time. So this is a very, very wide gradient, the way her skin, her nose connects to the rest of her cheek. Right here. And then we have the shadows on the lower parts of the eyelids. I'm going to use a blocking brush for that. Just a quick wide brush. I'm going to make sure the cast shadow is the same degree as like the average cast shadow value. As a general rule, when should we smudge versus soft brush? You'll see that at the end of this, I'm going to get a wide, large soft brush, and I'm going to just blend it over everything, just to create that bloom that comes out of skin. Skin is very hydrated, and it doesn't have seams, really. It's just a bunch of really moist skin cells just wrapped together, and they reflect the light, and it's translucent at the same time. So soft brush is the only thing that'll get you that effect. So when we're talking texture, soft brush is the way to go. When we're talking geometry, hard edge is the way to go. And when we use smudge tool, we're basically doing soft brushes work at a later time. If you feel like you don't need that stage in the soft brush, in the smudge tool, you can go straight for soft brush. Just remember where your edges are and where your geometries are. But for that other question, as a rule, make sure that the entirety of your portfolio isn't just filled with the industry standard. And even the industry standard isn't as beautiful as a Barbie doll. Sometimes it's a little off. And the best art that I've ever seen is the art that isn't afraid to paint an ugly, big, beautiful, hooked witch nose on a character. That's the best kind of character I could look at. And she's still considered very, very beautiful. Her eyes are large, her mouth is small. It all fits inside this triangle. She still has the female beauty standard. It's not a complete deviation outside. She's still a female. There's a lot of the gender, of course, in the beauty standard, in the golden ratio. There's a lot of gender preserved in there. And for every rule, there's an exception. But for now, as students, you have no concern with the exceptions. Just focus on the rules. Alright, so I'm going to zoom out all the way. Just try to figure out where I might have messed up. So the upper lash, the upper eyelid needs a little bit more size. The nose needs a little bit more cast shadow. The cheek. I'm just going to grayscale the reference as well. Don't know why I didn't do that before. Okay. So the eyelids. I'm going to start on the eyelids. They actually need to be balanced. She's got very, very big eyes. Humongous eyes. So a lot of the nose is hiding some of the eyes in there, so I'm trying to do that. Extending the size of this eye as well. I need that line for the crease. So there are a lot of places in the face where we have lines, and be very careful with those. It's not an excuse for you to just go in and start outlining. Okay. So now I'm just going to bring in some contrast. Where we start with contrast is always the dark spots. So even now we're still very, very careful with the amount of contrast we're bringing in. I do have to hurry it up though, but flat. But typically, again, we just want to start with the nose as one of the darkest areas. I'm just using a darken tool, or maybe, no, just darken. I'm just going to start darkening the nostril. Radially, so I'm using the edges, the feathered edges of the brush to start darkening that nostril. Alright, for the lips, underneath the lip is where that shadow starts. So sometimes I use a lasso tool, sometimes I use that brush technique. Maybe I'll just use the brush technique, where I just get some shadow, place it radially all over the lips, and then erase away where the lips end using an edge brush. Starting at the top. Trying to capture the exact likeness of her lips. So we're not incorporating the line to any lip specifically. We're not outlining any part of the lips. What we are doing is having the line happen accidentally, then directly drawing in the line of the lips. Okay, so make sure that your lines are accidental. I'm going to do the exact same thing with the eyelids. This is the same thing I do all the time. It's the same thing we did with our last painting where we were studying photo reference. Lower part here needs to be a little darker. But the reason why we smudge is because when we're using soft brush, we might accidentally paint over these edges. So when we smudge, we have control over exactly what we're blending. It's not the same brush all around. The smudge can shrink, it can be a little easier to control. And even then I didn't use the full black at all, staying very far away from it. That's pretty much how we're bringing in contrast. I'm going to do the same exact thing with the eyes. So I'm going to throw in some shadow. Oops, new layer, of course. Throw in some shadow. And then just let that shadow radially decrease. This is the key. You don't just plop a bunch of shadow on it. You have to already from the get-go start working with radial shading. And then this whole section, see that how her upper eyelid fat is completely just a complete edge? That's what I'm trying to do. And you have more than an hour to work on this. You can take your time. I have to rush, so I'm forgetting about a lot of stuff. But you have all the time in the world to just take your time and just observe. Map out the geometry. Make sure you have a nice, even, low contrast plate that's addressed all the major smudge areas and all the major contrast that will be needed of you later on. So I'm not looking at the questions just yet. If you have questions, please save them. Don't forget them. I have to just finish this up. But it's not photorealism that I'm promoting right now. What I'm promoting is that you in your mind, by studying this photograph today with this much concentration, later on you won't need a photograph. You'll be able to paint outside of references for you'll be able to last longer outside of a reference. Typically their reference should always be nearby. I mean, you can't do it better than the world can when it comes to lighting. You don't have a little lighting engine that's better than the world's version. So it's not a question of completely leaving references, and it's not a question of completely depending on references. It's a little bit of everything. Okay. So I'm just gonna erase away this line right here and just redarken it where I think it's needed. But I do want to go to my original idea, which is just making the nose a lot more contrasted than the eye. The outer part of the waterline isn't actually that thick. It's a lot thinner, and then we've got that shadow left over from her lashes. What's happening? Why'd you have to ban that guy? Are they being nasty? So right here there's like a big blob, a teardrop of shadow I forgot. So go back, zoom out. Whenever you forget anything native, anything that is the original cast shadows that come out of the original geometry, you go zoom right back out, buddy. Don't try to do it zoomed in. Don't be a hero. Okay. Alright, and this whole ball, this eyeball, it's got a big shadow on it. So I'm going to try to do that. Actually, I'll just work like this. Even if the shadow is on top of the pupil, don't feel like you have to outline the pupil. If the pupil is under a shadow as well, if the iris is under a shadow, just go for it. The lower half of this eyeball is in shadow. Whoops. The lower half of this one as well. The light is coming in from the side and from the top side, like there. And it's a 3/4 view. I have to hide some of this eye in behind the other one somehow. But when you originally paint a 3/4 view, please make sure that you start off mapping out what's going to be hidden behind other features. So I'm lowering the contrast altogether. I should do that in a new layer. And I'm going to erase away only where I know we have and need contrast. So the inner corner. The crease. And the eyebrow. Outer corner, lashes. Then right over here, right where it starts to get really bright on the cheeks, I'm going to bring in some extra contrast. We're almost done, and then you can ask some questions. So if this is what your painting looks like in the first hour to an hour and a half, you're good. It doesn't have to be finished. You don't have to have crazy details by this time. Even though you have edge work, doesn't mean that you can start shrinking your brush and drawing in every single eyelash. It's okay for the painting to look rough for the most part of the painting process. It doesn't have to be clean. There's like this obsession with us for completion, and we don't feel like that the painting is a painting until it's complete. It's a painting throughout the process. You're still creating something. It doesn't have to look complete. That completion rush will make you make some mistakes that are there. You'll pay for those mistakes later on. You probably skipped some geometry, probably skipped a major core shadow trying to rush through to get to the lines and the details. Right out of this nostril emerges a shadow, so I'm just right there. I'm done with that. And then, of course, there's the highlight of the other cheek. So in a new layer, I'm doing this. And then getting my edge brush. And then just erasing away wherever we have that stacking. Okay. Flatten. So go ahead and ask your questions. Make sure you write my full name, Istebrak, so the message is highlighted, or else it'll just get flooded out. I won't be able to catch it. Say my name. Probably shouldn't say that because there's a lot of pervs out there. Fuck. So weird, dude. I don't know why you're all sitting there watching me draw, and I'm telling you. Oh gosh. Alright. So I'm just gonna adjust just a little bit more. Shrink that brush. We're entering the later stages, so our brush will naturally just shrink. Make sure I have her exact gaze, which is very beautiful. I still haven't captured it. It's just such a pretty gaze. So concentrated, but very soft at the same time. Mine is just too soft. So probably would have measured a lot more if this was my work, to just make sure that I'm getting her exact look. Istebrak. What is a good way to learn what and what not to detail in a portrait? What should we spend time on? Istebrak. Sam, the least important things about what to detail is anything that is that first comes to mind when you think detail. Alright, whatever your natural impulse is to paint in detail, wherever it goes, probably pores, lashes, eyes, hair, drawing every single wrinkle in the eye, the pupil, around the pupil, those muscles in the pupil, drawing every little freckle, Every little wrinkle on the lips. These are all, like, the lip skin gets really, really wrinkled. All these areas are the last thing that get detailed. What is the most important to detail? Which areas are sharp when it comes to stacking one object in front of the other? They don't blend. When you have object A in front of object B and there's a distance between them and no skin connects them, one of these edges is sharp. The object in the foreground has a sharp edge. That is what needs to be detailed. That brings in detail. The sharpness of cast shadows. That's also another really, really important area to locate some detail and bring in some detail. So these are areas that need to be detailed. Okay, stay away from things that you naturally feel that you orbit towards when you think the word detail. Oh, this painting is so detailed, and you look at it and it's just like pixel for pixel photorealism, and they painted every single little hair, and it's just so freaky and uncanny to see every single little hair get like a pedestal around it. It doesn't cast a shadow. It's just such a weird little appreciation for something so unimportant for the form. She's got the lower part of her eyelid. The waterline on the upper eyelid is actually illuminated. Excuse me. Oh, look at the rest of the questions. Just keep asking. If I haven't seen it, repeat it. Alright, Istebrak, how to OC, tips and tricks. Istebrak, is it a good way to try different skin tones along with a different face? Maybe someone of a darker skin tone like Lupita Nyong'o? I don't even know who that is. Let's look at who that is. Okay. Okay, so you want someone that is it good to try different skin tones along with a different face? Maybe someone of a darker skin tone. Like, okay, so you're saying that she doesn't have to have an African face, but she has a skin tone that is as dark as hers. Yeah, you can do that. It's gonna look a little bit like a Final Fantasy character. For some reason, they have all of these angular English like kind of faces, like typically like Caucasian faces, but with a really dark, unusually dark value. So character design wise, if you are designing a whole race around, like for instance, if you guys noticed in Avatar when they designed those darker skinned blue people, they actually gave them pretty African faces. They gave them that whole Nubian face thing, and that's because they were trying to pull from that whole tribes that pretty much the only real tribes that are left over are the ones that we're familiar with when we say the word tribe, as we think African tribes, and that's what they were pulling from, that whole aesthetic, the tribal thing. So they pulled the face as much as the costumes and the way they live and that native way that they live and their lifestyle. They pulled the faces as a prop design, as a design aspect as well. So if you are working with a darker skin, just remember that it's going to be unusual and that you're breaking the rule. Just be aware that you are breaking that specific rule. And then what is the norm? What are we as the viewer referring it to? Tan skin can get pretty tan without it having, without it being too light. Too African looking. So really dark skin, Indian, right? So they have very angular features, but they're also very dark. So you don't have to necessarily draw that African style face. You try to find an equivalent of it in the real world and borrow from their features. And where the pigmentation happens, so a lot of it is around the nose and the eyes, the dark circles around the eyes. Some beautiful referencing. She's not that dark. I consider her tan. There's these features here. So there's a lot of references, and the more kind of versed you are with the cultures of the world, the easier it will be for you to make these kinds of design choices without looking like you're just putting two and two together and that's it. You're not really thinking about the cultural equivalent of it in the real world. It's a really angular kind of face instead of rounded off, which is what we see with African faces. Alright, is it good to try different skins? Okay, have you seen my wrench? I seem to have dropped it. Have you seen my wrench? Any gradients okay to use? Not the gradient tool, but using a gradient. Any gradients okay to use? When you have a sphere, and you're looking at, so let's say you're shading the sphere, and you have the terminator, and then you have the secondary light source, and then you have the thing, and then you have the radial shading, and then you have the light spot on the sphere. This all is a gradient. You know, gradients aren't a big no-no. You just have to make sure you're building them radially. Radial shading leaves behind gradients. So there's no such thing as that you're not allowed to use gradients. Use only radial shading and build your highlights like a sand pile. There's a lot of instances in the face where we have wide gradients because we're looking at it top down at the spherical shape. So this is a wide gradient. These are all sharp gradients, no gradient at all, but this is all one large gradient, dark to light. Okay, this is all one gradient right here, dark to light. Okay, so you just find these areas where they will be. Don't go for painting gradients. Don't sit there saying I want some gradients. Let the gradients happen accidentally as a result of really, really good radial shading. Were you using photo reference on your yesterday sketches of Amazon? Oh no, I wasn't. How to avoid doing much Barbie doll standard? Use references, and the references try to stick as close as possible to. Don't do this. All right. Don't search up pretty lady photo, because almost always you'll get some sort of stupid ass magazine garbo. Alright, where are her cast shadows? What happened to her face? Is her face always glowing? Is the light internal and it's just emerging very gradually? It pulses outwards. I need a face. If I'm an artist, I need some cast shadows. So don't do this. Alright? Try to search for stuff like this. Woman portrait, black and white. Let's see if some photographers have some maturity to them. Alright, so there's this one. Beautiful cast shadows. They're a little bit diffused, but you can still see some really, really, I refer to it as like uglifying cast shadows. They're not really flattering. They just make the face look very muddy, which is, you want to go for that. In the photo at least, not value-wise. You want to find this kind of stuff. Though she is still excessively pretty, she still has, her eyes are a little bit close to each other. Her mouth is just a little bit wider than it should be, and that's perfect. Right, so this is what you want to work from. You want to find these kinds of references. This is the stuff that will speak volumes in your portfolio. Of course, you want to show that you can work in the standard. So if you have to design some characters and you're drawing like a femme fatale or something as a character design, please do, show that in your portfolio that you can draw this kind of perfect standard. If you ever asked to design like the next, what's that stupid game with all the people and the guns and the shooting, and it's very popular, and all the gifs and the headshots, that one. Alright, I don't know what it's called. League of first person shooter. Okay, let's find some more. So this no, this no, this no. This is too pretty, too much makeup, it's hard to reference. Don't find references with too much makeup in them. You know what I usually do, what my secret is, and I'm revealing it to this is perfect if you can, but still the edges, shadows are too soft. Not enough edge work. What I do is I look up a picture of a man, and in my image I try to make him look like a woman. I keep a lot of his features, but I take away some of the Neanderthal brow and the excessive bone structure, but I do leave behind a lot. Oh my lord, look at these cast shadows. Oh mama. What the heck is with the water thingy? Okay, that's beautiful right there. If you can find stuff like this, this is really, really, really good for your portfolio. And then you can just make it Princess Leia, your rendition of Princess Leia. I don't know. You can turn it into a masterpiece if you wanted to, if your portfolio needed some masterpieces. But if you're working out of this kind of stuff and you're illustrating and your values are great and you're transferring from grayscale to color and you have a great reference, this is much more, has more skill points in it than just drawing the next Barbie doll face and drawing this bitch. Alright? It's not even, it's just all makeup. Literally. Her actual face is hidden behind the makeup. It's not her anymore. These kinds of pieces here, this one doesn't have much cast shadow. Right, this is what you should be working with. This one's pretty good. Only because it has the shadow on the side of the face. So portrait, cast shadow, all that kind of stuff is what you should be looking for. This one's pretty good. This in regards to painting from reference. This is not 14-day challenge format. For the 14-day challenge format, please do learn the beauty standard. Just don't get stuck in it. In order to break the rules, you have to learn them. So to rush along the process, I'm just gonna quickly use dodge tool just so I can finish this for a proper before and after. Okay, let's see some other questions. La 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 la. Thank you, Sam. Thank you for your kind words. Okay, so Sophia asked how to draw an original character, tips and tricks. Is that what you meant, Sophia? Just wanted to answer the technical questions first. Be a good first-person shooter. Yeah, what was it called? What was that game called? Overwatch. Overwatch, yes. Beauty comes in many shapes and colors. Yes, yes it does. Alright, and then I'm going to use burn tool on shadows. I don't recommend this because it just does too much work. See that? That's just a little bitch. Alright. Stupid dodge. I mean burn and dodge. They're so temperamental. They're like a couple that you just don't want to hang out with. They're like a really angry couple. I've always seen them as like an angry couple. And they're sour and they're only friends with each other. Yeah. So right here on the tip of the nose, there's little edge. There's leftover geometry I need to blend out. Okay. So I'm going to show the before and after, and you guys watched everything. You were there watching everything. What we started off with was we fixed the likeness. We made sure that some of the likeness is still there, but really the biggest thing about the study is the geometry and the fact that we captured those beautiful cast shadows. So I'm just trying to hurry up with the dodge and burn. If you do use dodge and burn, use them only in grayscale. Try to avoid using them late game as well. And I still just don't feel right about these features. Yeah, her nose needs to be pushed out a little bit more. And this eye does need to be hidden behind the nose, but that's too much cut and paste right now. And then the background should be a little darker. She has a stronger chin, bigger lips, but all together. What we've captured was the likeness. So before, after. Alright? So what have you captured in the painting is my question. And all you've done is that enforce, by using the painting as a guide, you're just finding ways to apply the golden ratio excessively, or that perfect beauty. And just know that in your rendition, just by looking at this before and after, you were looking at a reflection of what your blind spots. You're seeing your blind spot. This before and after reveals a blind spot to you. There's a lot of work left to do on this painting, but the point is that you've worked, your entire effort the entire time was for capturing what the specific light, the artifact of the light, like the little just leftover light instance, this single frame, and the way light happened to happen in this photograph is the main deal here, is the main, your muse. Istebrak, sometimes I use the airbrush tool for shading. Is that bad? I never use the airbrush. I have no opinion on it at all. But I don't even know where to find it. I don't even know where to find it. Yeah, I don't even use it. If it's doing all the work for you, if that's the kind of brush it is, then no, don't use it. It's gonna stand in the way of your ability to blend shades together and then know when to stop. So it's not that it blends too much for you. Everyone knows how to blend. Even those who think they don't know how to blend know how to blend. Just make sure that there's no lines. You combine them together into a gradient. That's what blending means. What the big problem is with blending is that you don't know when to stop. Okay? And using references back and forth and working with referencing, you eventually learn when to stop. You'll eventually learn that there's edge work here. There's some real wiring, mechanics here that I can't fuck with. There's geometry in here that I can't mess around with. Istebrak, how do you go about finding the midtone of the face? When you think about the skin type, so is it a dark person, is it a lighter person, then it's very easy to decide on the midtone. Always choose your midtone first. The edges of the face need some shading as well. Select inverse. So right here, radially, just introduce some edges in the lower half. This beard shadow, as I call it. It's a very, look at that cast shadow on her shirt too, golly. Never use fashion photography as a reference for your art. Okay? Alright, any more questions? Vicky, landscape painting doesn't really need that much detail, but study all the masters of landscape. I thought the airbrush tool was just a round brush with the hardness all the way down. Do you mean soft brush when you say airbrush? I'm really not sure if you're even referring to Photoshop. See that big shadow on the lower half of her face? If you squint your eyes, you see a lot of it left over. And ours was just a little light. And that's what's going to make her pop out of the painting ever so slowly. Just gradually, radially introduce that shadow. This whole part here needs to be cropped. The thing is, we don't really have a black background behind where she does have some shadow, so you might want to blur it in just slightly. But because I'm referring to the window. But yeah, just to help her pop out of the background a little bit. Istebrak, speaking of midtones, I noticed that you go less saturated when you shade, more on the highlights. I saturate near the highlights, especially around the highlights. The light is very white, so too much light removes saturation. Dark is too dark, doesn't have enough light to provide saturation. The midtone leaking into the highlight is where we have the most saturation. We don't have saturation excessively in the midtones. We choose how much saturation we want. If you're working straight into color, saturation chosen early on with the midtone is the limit. You can't choose too saturated early on either, because the midtone is just the midtone. It's not the highlight or the highlight midtone. Okay guys, I'm gonna stop asking, because if I do, it may seem like spam. Istebrak, also, I use Fire Alpaca. Should I stick with it or should I use GIMP? I don't know what's Fire Alpaca and what's GIMP, and I'm very cautious of the word GIMP because John, who you guys might know, always comes on my channel and asks me about GIMP. I don't even know what GIMP is. He's always trolling me. Is it a painting software or is it a file sharing software? Is it like an image uploader? I really don't know. Any more questions? Any tips on painting landscape? Because I'm having problems with that, especially the details. That's a whole other unit in and of itself. But if you haven't started form studies, start them as soon as possible, because landscapes are the biggest test of your ability to create a form and render that form. PS4 is freaking out. Should have turned it off. Okay. Any more questions? GIMP is a painting software. Is it really? Is a free photo editor. I don't know. I don't know who to trust. John's ruined me. I don't know. Fuck you, John. Alright. So that's it for today. I hope this lesson kind of opens up your eyes just a little bit. There is no pressure. If this lesson did anything, I hope it revealed to you that it's very easy to paint off a reference, as long as you keep your geometry in mind. And the point is, if you don't see geometries, now you've revealed to yourself, okay, that's my weak spot. I'm going to start trying to find the geometries, trying to see them constantly in my reference. So if you draw red marks and try to find where the geometric anatomy is in your painting, if you spend some time drawing lines all over your reference, trying to map out the polys of your reference, you will never be able to unsee those geometries. They will always be there. So just keep that in mind. It's not impossible. You definitely will learn it. It will take some practice. Of course, everything worthwhile takes some practice. But as long as you're on the right path, you will see improvement on a daily basis. I'm not talking like, oh yeah, in 3 years you'll get better. Absolutely not. The fundamentals are not against you. They're not these like really hard to earn. Like, you don't earn them unless you like enter like this dungeon and it's like a battle royale and you finally learn fundamentals. No, it's like they're so student friendly, and there's only so many of them. There isn't that much physics in the world. It's very unified, very minimal rules of physics that we pull fundamentals from. Istebrak, what will you do with the other photo you downloaded? Oh, I didn't have enough time to look at the other critiques. I might just have to see them on Thursday. Alright, so thanks everyone for coming today. Have a great day, guys. If you guys are interested in what I do, please go to istebrak.com. Everything is available there. Google Plus is where you can go to post some of your work. The transformation grant is still open for people who are interested in applying. You win a lot of stuff, or you are given a lot of stuff in the scholarship type of way. It's not a contest. Facebook is if you can message me if you want your original copy sent back to you. If you don't message me right away, the files are deleted. I do give you time enough after I upload the video, but yeah. Anyways, YouTube is where I go to upload these recordings. If you missed today's class, you can just go to YouTube. This creeper is always just looking at us. I'm just so sick of his face. Twitter is where I announce some work. And no, I'm starting to lose my words. I'm getting really dizzy. Where I announce class cancellations and important announcements. And but yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.